And welcome everybody to a kind of a late night after dark Canes Corner podcast right before the draft. We are less than 24 hours away from the draft. And I salute to all of you Hurricanes fans. So we'll start this off to a with a toast to Jalen Chatfield and his 3-year, $3 million annual contract, to hopefully many more Hurricanes returning to the fold. A Lower Falls Light IPA by Highland Brewing. And I do that without any form of compensation at all. That is tasty. All right, so let's get to a bunch of things here. I don't know how long we're going to be here. Hopefully not very long, but I appreciate some of you who decided, you know what, we're going to do this. There's nothing else going on. The men's national team lost earlier today, down to 10 men. I won't even mention what's going on right now. So let's get right to it. The NBA draft is in our rearview mirror. People are complaining about nepotism. So a couple of things before we get going into the free agent conversation and a potential trade for Martin Necas and some other things that happened today. One, Hurricanes fans were not that far away from seeing all sorts of changes at PNC Arena, inside the arena, outside the arena. The deal was signed today. Centennial Authority, the Hurricanes, the city, all of that. So between 5 and 10 years, you're going to see housing, event spaces, a concert space, bars, restaurants, a sports book, as Tom Dundon and the Hurricanes are going to build up the arena area to a place where you can go to a game and then leave the game and go have a good time without having to, get in your car and drive somewhere else. Yes, you're going to have to get in your car at some point. We want everybody to act responsibly. But I've been saying this for a long, long time about the arena area, is that it's very anti today to have an arena that is so far removed from an entertainment district. It just isn't the case anywhere. Every place has an adjacent area, just about. I shouldn't say every place. There are still, football and baseball stadiums that are in giant parking lots. But those situations are becoming more and more rare. So Tom Dundon has wanted to build up and develop that area around PNC Arena and Carter Finley Stadium, and they're going to do it. And it's going to take a while. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I cannot wait to see what it looks like. I hope that I am still recognizable when it's all said and done. So we have that to look forward to. And as a plug, tomorrow on the radio show, Philip Isley, who is the chairman of the Centennial Authority, and Raleigh Mayor Marianne Baldwin will both be on to talk about, with Philip Isley's case, how the deal came to be, and how it kind of shaped and all of that, and how excited he is to see what happens. And then with Marianne Baldwin, the mayor, what is her favorite part of what is going to happen in that area. And that is very cool. And what can Raleigh residents, Wake County residents, expect from it? It's not just Raleigh and Wake County, although they're going to reap a lot of the benefits, but really Hurricanes fans. What can Hurricanes fans expect? So all, I think, just an unbelievable, cool development and a great day for Hurricanes fans. All right. Before we get into free agent discussions and all of that, a couple of just housekeeping business, not business, but just an explainer for just in case not everybody knows. So the Carolina Hurricanes had 11, now have 10 free agents. 10 free agents. And I want to make sure I don't forget this one. And one of which, it was 11, but Jalen Chatfield has signed. And these free agents come in one of two categories. They are restricted free agents and they are unrestricted free agents. The restricted free agents, Seth Jarvis, Jack Drury, Martin Necas, are still under team control until they become, have been in the league a certain amount of time. Jarvis and Drury are just playing, have just played out their entry-level contract, their initial contract. Each were 3-year deals. And they both have, I think, 5 more years or 4 more years, I believe, 4 more years of their careers before they are even eligible to be unrestricted free agents. And we'll get to a date which is coming up on Monday and what it means. And when you are an unrestricted free agent, you can sign anywhere with anybody for any amount, at least any amount that the league allows. But until you are an unrestricted free agent, your contract is still controlled by the team. And in the case of Jarvis and Drury and Necas, the Hurricanes control their contracts. Jarvis and Drury have just played on their have expired their entry-level contract, their first contract. Necas did that 2 years ago, signed a 2-year contract with Carolina after that, and now still has 2 more years of restricted free agency before he becomes an unrestricted free agent. So Carolina still controls where he can play essentially his rights. So that's the difference between RFA and a UFA. Carolina's unrestricted free agents are currently Martinook, Guentzel, Skjei, Pesce, Teravainen, Nason. Am I forgetting one? I think so. Tony DeAngelo is also an unrestricted free agent. Let's write that down. So I think that covers at least the NHL players, right? Martinook, Guentzel, Skjei, Pesce, Teravainen, Nason, Tony DeAngelo. Jalen Chatfield was an unrestricted free agent. He has signed his contract. The RFAs are Jarvis, Drury, and Necas. Before we continue, and again, if I refer to something as an ELC, that's entry-level contract. Normally, those are 3 years, but they can be shorter. And we'll get into some potential scenarios for that in a second. RFA, restricted free agent. UFA, unrestricted free agent. Just so you know. All right. Congratulations to Pyotr Kochetkov for being named to the NHL's all-rookie team. I think tied for rookie goaltenders and wins. Really, after a very rough start, had a great year. We've already talked about it. Wished that he was utilized a little bit more in the playoffs. He wasn't. Maybe that was part of the downfall of Carolina and Freddie Anderson, who probably got worn out. But Kochetkov had a wonderful year. Maybe he is, in fact, the goaltender of the future. We'll see how Carolina feels about it as we move on throughout the offseason, throughout the summer, as we get near training camp. Pardon me. I needed a sip. All right. And congratulations to Sebastian Aho. I don't know who the voter was, but in the Hart Trophy voting for the league MVP, which was won handily by Nathan MacKinnon, Sebastian Aho received a 5th place vote. One, which, hey, that's cool. I thought Aho had a wonderful year. His $9.75 million contract for 8 years kicks in at the start of next season. All right, the moment you've been waiting for, I have delayed long enough. Unrestricted free agents. I'm going to start off with maybe some potential bad news. Sources for me today, 2 different sources. Hurricanes and Jordan Martinook still talking about a contract. I think Carolina would love to have him back, and I think Jordan Martinook would love to be back. This is going to go to July 1 unless Carolina, I think, raises their offer considerably. I don't know what Carolina's offer is, but I think I know basically the range it is. And I think Carolina's range is probably in the neighborhood of 3 years, $2.5 million, maybe $2.75 million. And I think that's probably fair. I think it's probably on the low side of fair, but it's in the neighborhood of fair. And it's a little bit more than Jesper Fast received last year. But I do think that Martinook is a better player is not the right word, a different player, believe it or not, even though they're both essentially what Carolina would say part of their energy identity line, to use that term. I think Martinook provides a little bit more offense. I think Martinook provides a little bit more, certainly vocal leadership. And I look at Martinook, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I look at Martinook as part of the culture, part of the core of this team. Rod Brindamore pointed out to me earlier this week, Jordan Staal is really the culture of this team, and I get it. I totally understand it. But we're not talking about Jordan Staal. We are talking about Jordan Martinook. And when Carolina traded for him, who knew that he would grow into this type of a leader, this type of a barometer for the Hurricanes? I believe he's a critical piece. But I do know this about the organization. They have a very good idea of what players are worth on the open market and to them. And I think that they are probably pretty far apart between where Jordan Martinook's camp is and where the team feels like, he should be. So I think the team would probably be okay with, I think they'd prefer 2 years, but I think they'd be okay with 3 years at about 2.5, 2.75. But I believe, based on two things, that Jordan Martinook is probably going to go to July 1, and there will be at least one, and I think more than one team, that will look at Martinook and say, you know what, we think we can get 4 years out of him or 3 years out of him, and we are willing to give him a 4th year. And we are willing to pay him just a little bit more money because of what he provides that would be in the intangible column. And I'll point to 2 contracts that were signed just a few years ago as examples. Brock McGinn signed a 4-year deal, $2.7 million a year with Pittsburgh. That did not go well for Brock McGinn or Pittsburgh. In fact, he played with Anaheim this past year. And Barclay Goodrow, who signed a 6-year deal worth about $3.7 million with the Rangers after the second of the Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup titles. And Goodrow was just traded by the Rangers back to San Jose, where he came from. And that is a problem for the Hurricanes, because I think Jordan Martinook is looking at those 2 types of deals and saying, I'm worth maybe not exactly what Goodrow is worth, who got a 6-year deal, but probably something along the lines of where Brock McGinn is, but a little bit better, because I do provide a little bit of scoring punch. And we would be lying if we thought he didn't. Martinook has scored a bunch of big goals for Carolina. Remember last year in the Devils series, the series he had against the Devils in the second round of the playoffs. So there is some scoring punch with Martinook. Not a ton. I'm not calling him a sniper. I don't think he's going to score 20. But because of the ice time he gets and the situations he puts himself in, he's going to score anywhere from 10 to 15 goals. And he's going to get in the neighborhood of 30 points. And I'm not saying that's worth a ton of money, but you throw in the intangibles, and Jordan Martinook is a player that helps you win. So I will be surprised if on July 1, if the Hurricanes can't come to an agreement before then, and they got a couple of days, I will be surprised if Jordan Martinook doesn't sign somewhere 4 times 3.25, 4 times 3.5. So I'm more worried about that one than I ever have been based on conversations that I've had. So I started with some bad news because I think that would be bad news for Carolina. Not that you can't replace Jordan Martinook, but there's nobody internally that replaces Jordan Martinook. That would have to be found on the outside. Again, not saying you can't find it. There are plenty of players that play with the energy and the middling offensive ability of Jordan Martinook, who can kill penalties and all that. But I think Jordan Martinook really does epitomize what the Hurricanes culture is. So it would be I think it would be a tough day for Hurricanes fans to lose Jordan Martinook. So we start with that. I won't go as long with some of these other players. All right, let's go right down my list here. Jake Guentzel. At this point, there might be a better chance that Guentzel is back than Martinook is back, and that wouldn't be a bad thing, obviously. But it's really going to be up to whether or not Jake Guentzel is willing to play here for, let's just say, a little bit less than $8 million per, or play elsewhere for right around 9, maybe a shade over $9 million per. But ultimately, the total value of the contract will be about the same. If the Hurricanes are offering the Andrei Svechnikov contract, let's just use that as a base. $62 million over 8 years. If another team offers him $62 million over 7 years, that's just under 9. They'd probably go just maybe right at 9, maybe a shade more. So is it really worth a couple more million, 3 more million, and 1 less year? It all depends. It depends on the team doing the offering. We know that San Jose was interested. We know that Vancouver is interested. We know that Chicago is interested. Boy, wouldn't you like to play next to Connor Bedard? So it's very possible that Jake Guentzel is going to go for the higher average annual value. Carolina will not meet that. I think Carolina is probably hoping to get out of this one with Jake Guentzel. And, I mean, they're going to need some help. They're going to need a haircut. A little bit of we'll just use the term hometown discount to keep him. Before I go on, I want to emphasize this. I will never tell a player to accept less money to stay where he is. I'll never tell him to do that. That is entirely a personal choice. Every player, every athlete in professional sports has earned and deserves the right to get every single dollar they can get out of their career. Fans who question or who criticize players for that would never do the same thing within their own life. I'm sorry. If that is harsh, I can't help you. Now, that doesn't mean that you should always take the most money. I think you should always do what is best for you. In some cases, I think players are ill-advised to simply take the highest contract, because I think where you play matters to how you play. I think the fit, your surroundings, athletes never take into account how their surroundings, teammates, coaches, where you live day to day, how that contributes to your performance. I don't think that is ever thought of enough. But with that said, I'm not going to criticize a single player and I won't think badly of them for taking the most money out there. Hopefully, those two things marry up. Jake Guentzel, it's going to be a decision for him. I'll just throw sort of fictitious numbers. 62 over 8 in Carolina, 64 over 7 in Vancouver or Chicago or San Jose. I don't think the number goes higher than that, but you never know. Brady Skjei, man, I know in Pierre LeBrun's piece on The Athletic, there is I think some people thought it was a quote from Eric Tulsky, but it wasn't. It was more of a feeling from Pierre LeBrun that the Hurricanes have a 50-50 shot to keep Brady Skjei. Personally, I wish they could keep Skjei and Pesce. I don't believe they'll keep either. And it's not because they don't want them. It's because ultimately, like this year, there's a need. There's a need for both this year. But next year, there might not be. Certainly on the left side next year. Well, there will be because Dmitry Orlov will be gone. But Alexander Nikishin will be here. And Alexander Nikishin from Russia will be here probably before the end of this upcoming season. As soon as the KHL season is over, he's going to sign his entry-level contract, his ELC, which probably won't be 3 years. My guess is it'll be a 2-year ELC. And so it'll be this year and the whatever the balance is of this year and then next year. So it'll really be a 1-year ELC, and then he'll be a restricted free agent. So there's really no place for Skjei to play because Jacob Slavin is not going anywhere. If he were right-handed, man, that would be a much easier one. I think Skjei has the better chance of being an effective player longer in his career because I don't believe Skjei's body is or will break down. I mean, anything could happen. As much as I love Brett Pesce, and I can't say this enough, he is one of my favorite players ever to wear a Hurricanes uniform. I just don't have great confidence that his body is going to hold up. Plus, he doesn't provide much offense, if at all. And I think the underlying numbers show a little bit of a drop-off in his play already. So I don't see Brett Pesce staying. As for Brady Skjei, to get back, I think the team would love it if they could figure out a way because he represents so many good things. Great skating, two-way play, can log heavy ice time, plays in every situation, doesn't have to be on the power play, but can. Handsome as hell. Seriously. I mean, he's a good-looking man. Much better looking than Pesce. But Brady Skjei is going to walk into free agency on July 1, and somebody's going to pay him $7.5 million over 7 years because he's a 45 to 50 point guy, getting, 22, 23 minutes a night. Maybe not quite 45 to 50, but he's going to be in the 40 to 45 point range every year. He had 17 goals last year. He had double-digit goals this year, led Carolina's blue line in scoring. He's going to get paid. And I just don't think Carolina is going to be able to even come close to meeting that. For all the cap space that Carolina has, they got a lot of players to sign. So I don't see that happening for Skjei. I think if Pesce goes into free agency and doesn't get what he wants out there, yeah, maybe Brett can come back on a 4-year deal, but I think that number is going to be around 5.5 here. But again, I think Pesce's going to see somebody's going to look at Pesce and say, solid, stay-at-home defenseman, no mistakes, smart guy. Maybe he's not going to play 6 or 7 more years, but I think we can go 5 times 6.5, and I don't think Carolina will meet that. I really don't. So let's see. We have 3 more unrestricted free agents to get through. And then if I can, I'll try to go through some of the questions that are queuing up here. Teuvo Teravainen. I have no idea if the team has even started talking to Turbo, but I'm guessing they have. And I'm also guessing that Teuvo Teravainen could end up in many ways like Nino Niederreiter. And I'll tell you this story about the Hurricanes and Nino Niederreiter. A couple of years ago, Nino had that great year playing alongside Jordan Martinook. Was it Martinook or is it Fost and Staal? Anyway, Niederreiter had a great year playing on the left side of that line. And he scored a bunch of goals. He didn't score a ton. Wasn't like he was a 70-point guy. And he had another disappointing postseason because that's really what Nino is, a regular season contributor, and not much happens in the playoffs. But Nino did enough to think that there was a 5-year, $25 million contract waiting for him. And the Hurricanes valued Nino at 2 years, $4 million each, $4 million a year. That's where the Hurricanes thought he'd be. And we get into free agency. Carolina moves on to another player because Nino wasn't going to play for $8 million over 2. And they ended up signing for $8 million over 2. I think it was Nashville. And man, that's a bummer because Carolina would have loved to have had him back at that number. But Nino and his agents thought there was a bigger payday out there, which is absolutely their right. And it didn't happen for him. And I mean, it's very possible that this is what we're talking about with Teuvo Teravainen. And the numbers aren't necessarily identical. Like, I think Carolina would like to have Teuvo back at pretty much the same number he just played at, which was 5.4. Because to be honest, I'm not sure Teravainen is more than a $5.4 million player. He was a couple of years ago. All right. I know how many goals he had this year. He had a good year. He didn't have a great year, a good year. He is a 200-foot player. He's a good penalty killer. He's a responsible player defensively. He does have a high end. He can get on some hot streaks. But ultimately, we're talking about somebody who's about maybe a 60-point guy. And I don't know if he's going to play on your top line with Sebastian Aho anymore. So, are you going to pay that guy 6.5? I don't think so. So I think if Teravainen was willing to play for 5.25 over 3 years, 5 over 3 years, not over, but a year for 3 years, I think they could do something with Teuvo Teravainen. But I'm not sure Teuvo's going to accept that, and I'm not sure Teuvo's going to get that on the open market. And the Hurricanes might value him less than that, but it's hard to accept a significant pay cut. So that's where we are with Teravainen. I'd love to have him back. I know Sebastian Aho would love to have him back. I know Teuvo Teravainen would love to be back. But there's another guy that I think the Hurricanes privately probably worry about aging and how his body, because Teuvo, I don't know if you know this, not a workout warrior. Steph Nason. I think Steph Nason has great value to Carolina to a point. I'm not saying you can easily replace somebody who, given the right set of circumstances, playing as, getting on one of the power play units, not playing in a fourth line role, probably playing in a third line role. And I think we'll talk about that briefly before we have to close up shop. But if he can get 12 to 13 minutes a night on the right, in the right combination, I think Nason can probably get between, anywhere from 35 to 45 points. But I think that's probably asking a lot. And I think if we're in the neighborhood of just 35 points, let's just say 15 goals, 20 assists. What is that worth? I don't think it's worth a ton. Nason played basically on a league minimum contract. I think the Hurricanes would be willing to double that, maybe even go a little bit higher than double that. But I don't think it's more than $2 million a year. I think it's probably more along the lines of Nason 2 times 1 3/4. Maybe it's 1.75 and then 2, the 2 years for a 2-year deal. That's what I would do if I were Carolina. I would be comfortable with that if I were Carolina. But Nason might go out into the market and somebody might say, hey, 2.25 times 3. And I don't think Carolina is going to do that. So I have not painted a rosy picture. It does look like this is going to be a much different looking roster than it has been in the past, which, I mean, Carolina's had turnover before, but we are looking at some drastic turnover of key pieces. Tony DeAngelo, I think, could be back. It would be basically maybe $1 million, maybe a shade more. But he is not going to be a priority for this team because the way I look at it, Brent Burns is here. Jalen Chatfield is here. They're going to give Scott Morrow every opportunity to be the third pair right shot defenseman. And I just don't know that there's a spot for Tony DeAngelo on the roster. I think they're going to let him go into free agency. And if they feel like they need to circle back later on, they will. Rod loves him. I think the team likes him. I mean, the players in the locker room like him too, even though chances are his two best buddies are gone, Skjei and Pesce. And his other good friend, Vincent Trocheck's already in New York. So I just don't have a great feeling about Tony DeAngelo returning. All right, to the restricted free agents, then we'll try to answer a couple of questions and we'll say goodnight. Seth Jarvis, the only way this is not 8 years at, I'm just going to say $8 million. And it could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less, but I'm just going to go ballpark $8 million. The only way it's not is if the Hurricanes can convince them to do a bridge deal at a relatively low number, knowing that a couple of years down the road, Jarvis is going to get the 8-year deal. Hold on while I sip because I'm a little parched. Yes. Highland Brewing always works. If you do a 3-year deal for, let's just say, $18 million, and you structure it as, we're trying to think, 18 million would be an average of 6 a year, right? 4, 6, 8. $4 million the first year, $6 million the second year, $8 million the third year. Then the qualifying offer after 3 years, still 1 year out from unrestricted free agency, would be a little bit more than 8. So then what you know is 3 years down the road, Seth Jarvis is going to make at least $8 million, or at least the qualifying offer is going to be at least $8.5 million or $9 million. You can certainly do that. That would be a contract that I actually think in terms of a bridge deal might work. The problem is, after the first couple of years, it ain't team friendly. Yes, the cap's going to continue to go up. And yes, you can get the cap hit for Seth Jarvis over the next several years to be like $6 million, or maybe even a shade lower if you wanted to do an average of 5 a year and do 3, 5, 7. If you could convince the agent to do that, that's great. And they know that at age 25, Jarvis is going into the 8-year deal. Whatever floats your boat. But 3 years from now, if Jarvis is Carolina's best player, and I'm telling you that might be the case. Heck, it might be the case next year. Then that contract is going to be way more expensive. This is why I do it now. I do the 8 years now. And I think you can do it right around 8. It will not make anybody upset in 2 years when he is one of those guys. Now, he's not one of those guys, but what is Sebastian Aho around the league? He is the second-tier superstar. He's not a McDavid. McDavid is on a planet all of his own. He's not a McKinnon. He's not a Matthews. He's not a Draisaitl. It's not one of those, but he is a great, great player. And that's what Jarvis is. And I think Jarvis has the potential to be better than Aho. If he were 2 inches taller, who knows? So I think it's got to be 8 years, but anything could happen there. Jack Drury, not going to be a lot of money. My guess is, heck, that could even be a 1-year deal. And if I'm Jack Drury's agent, I might like to do a 1-year deal. But that's what I think. It'd be, maybe 2 times 2 times 1.5, 2 times, right? Because that's basically what you get from Jack Drury in terms of production. I don't think he's going to be a 45 or 50 point guy yet. Maybe he'll never be that. He probably won't be. Maybe it's 2 times 2, whatever. And then it gets to Martin Necas. And I guess this will be the last order of business before I go kind of check out some questions here. The Necas thing is, I think, pretty complicated. The player probably does want to change scenery. But at the same time, I think the player loves his teammates. And I think he might not love Rod Brind'Amour. I think he will play for Rod Brind'Amour. And I do not think it's a case where he is a miserable player. Every player wants more responsibility, wants to play more, wants more ice time, wants to play with the best players. And I think Necas will get that opportunity here next year if he's here. But at the same time, for the Hurricanes, he is also an asset. And it's connected to a lot of different things. For instance, if they keep Necas, they won't have Guentzel. If they sign Guentzel, there's no chance that they won't trade Necas. But ultimately, you can't give Martin Necas away. You can't just say, well, he doesn't want to be here. He wants to be a center. Therefore, we have to just trade him. We'll do something right for him. No, you got to make your franchise better. You got to make your team better. You need organizational depth in certain positions, maybe you need draft capital. I don't know, but you're not giving Necas away. 2 teams that were mentioned in trades. There's a lot of teams that are interested. Vancouver's interested. Columbus is interested. Nashville's interested. Buffalo is interested. The Devils are interested. There was a story where the Devils are dangling the 10th overall pick. Well, that ain't going to get it done. But what could the Devils throw in along with the 10th overall pick to get Martin Necas? The organization believes that Necas is going to be right around a point a game next year. Whether or not we agree with that, and I don't, but it doesn't matter. I do think Necas can be a 65 to 70 point guy, which is pretty close to a point a game. But I think he can be that. I think he can be maybe a souped up, in terms of his speed and all of that, version of Teuvo Teravainen without the defense. Although it's there. He has capabilities. He just needs to dedicate himself to that. But because the team values him in that way, when they go to make a trade, they're going to treat him that way. So they're not trading Necas for futures. They're going to trade, if they trade him, yeah, a future wouldn't be bad, especially a high draft pick even this year. But they're going to get a player that they can put on the ice, or more than one player, tomorrow. So I don't know how much of this makes any sense to the Devils, or whether or not it makes sense overall. But I think the Hurricanes, if you're going to move Necas to the Devils, you can be asking about Dawson Mercer, who is sort of a center. He's a right shot, has played center, terrible faceoff guy. Or Simon Nemec, who is a young defenseman who played against Carolina this year. I don't know if you get a number 1 pick and Nemec at both for Necas. Maybe you have to throw something else in to get that. But I do think if you're Carolina and you are trading a player that with the talent of Necas, you are getting something tasty back. So I think you can rest on this. The Hurricanes will not devalue Martin Necas. If he goes to Nashville for UC Saros, it ain't just UC Saros coming back. It's Saros and something. And it's something substantial. Saros is only going to be around for one more year. Saros is going to go into free agency and make $8 million a year as a goaltender. Somebody's going to pay him that, and the Hurricanes won't. So, maybe you can get Askarov, the goalie prospect, plus something else for Necas. That would make more sense. But I don't believe that the Hurricanes are going to just give Necas away because theoretically he wants to be somewhere else. And by the way, as an aside, for all of the fans who don't want Necas traded within the Eastern Conference, certainly within the division, because, he's going to haunt us. Well, if you trade him, you don't get the choice. You don't have the right to, I didn't say feel that way, but I've just never played that game. First of all, I love Marty. I hope wherever he goes, he's great. And yeah, he's going to do well against us because he's good. Just like Jeff Skinner scores a lot of goals against Carolina because, Jeff Skinner's a good goal scorer. So just going to have to live with that. So I'm not even worried about it. If you can make your team better, it doesn't matter. If you can make your team better, it doesn't matter what Martin Necas does to you over time. The other sentiment I saw out there about the Devils is that, man, they just got a real goalie. Why do we want to help them out? That's another story altogether. I do think the New Jersey Devils are going to be a problem next year. For real. Making the playoffs, certainly Carolina, you got some great players, but there's a lot of holes. Making the playoffs ain't a guarantee next year. It wasn't a guarantee this year. I know Carolina played really well, ended up with the third best record, but man, for about 6 weeks, it was definitely touch and go how the season was going to go until Pyotr Kochetkov really caught fire in the middle of December. We were all kind of worried about whether or not Carolina had enough goaltending to get them through the season. Obviously, Kochetkov turned out to be fine, as evidenced by being an all-rookie, first-team all-NHL rookie goaltender this year. All right, let me go through some questions here. I know Dylan was happy that we did this tonight, off topic, but the NHL award show was super cringe. I didn't watch. I don't care. I don't care about award shows. Let's see. I talked about restricted and unrestricted free agents. Let's see what we got here. Anyone else lagging? I don't know. I'm not. I probably am. I live out in the sticks. Let's see. They're trying to get Guentzel deal done before the draft, according to Connor. Yeah, I'm sure they are. Because if they do get the Guentzel deal done before the draft, it gives them more freedom to trade Necas and maybe get something back in this draft. See, that's the one thing that almost allows you to think at least enough about futures for Necas is if you've already got Jake Guentzel signed. Remember, the Hurricanes have about $24 million worth of cap space. But they have a lot of players to sign, so it's not like they've got tons of room. They're going to have to find a bunch of low-cost players. You've got, who is it, Brendan Lemieux on basically a league minimum deal. He's going to be part of the mix next year, probably play a lot more than he played this year. Will says he's got a gut feeling Guentzel stays. He may. Like I said before, if he stays, it's because he loves the fit, loved playing with Aho, and thinks that this team is close enough to win a Stanley Cup. Look, at the risk of running too long here, I want to talk about very quickly. I said this a few years ago. People thought I was crazy. Carolina needs this. Carolina needs that. Carolina has to go get this, go get that. And there are things that Carolina needs. I think they need an upgrade in goaltending. I'd love to see a better number 2 center. It all depends. What is Evgeny Kuznetsov going to be next year? Is he even going to be here next year? Because there's no guarantees there. Is Jesperi Kotkaniemi going to be here next year? If he is he playing the wing? Is he playing center? Is he ever going to be even close to what this organization paid for? I have my doubts. But ultimately, the biggest improvement in Carolina will come from within. It will come from another year of Seth Jarvis, another year of growth. increased production from Seth. But you know where the real increase in Carolina production is going to come from? Where it has to come from. Everybody knows what I'm about to say. Andrei Svechnikov. At some point, Andrei has to be the point-a-game guy all year long. It can't just be for 2 weeks and then a month of 1 goal and 4 assists. Here's the thing. Andrei can contribute in many ways without scoring. He plays a high-energy, physical game. We need him to stay out of the box more, yes. But Andrei does impact the game even without getting on the score sheet. So what? You got to be on the score sheet too. If you're making the money Andrei is making, if you are getting the ice time Andrei is getting, you must produce goals. That's where the improvement's going to come from. Yes, bringing back Jake Guentzel. Yes, another year Seth Jarvis. Yes, another step forward for Sebastian Aho, maybe more than one fifth-place vote for the Hart Trophy. All of these things, yeah, these are important. There is nothing more important next year than an Andrei Svechnikov cracking the 80-point barrier. That is what this team needs. They need him to shoot the puck more in the power play. Right? They need that. So, in terms of anything else, who knows? If you were holding a pea shooter to my head, I would say that it's unlikely that Carolina keeps any of the big name unrestricted free agents. It's not impossible. And yes, you can make a case for Guentzel. You can make a case for maybe even Pesce better than Skjei, because I think the number will be lower. But I also think that there are enough teams out there who have enough cap space, who have a need, and Carolina's got a lot of attractive players hitting unrestricted free agency Monday at noon. So Monday could be a tough day for Hurricanes fans, but who knows? Maybe it won't be. But we got a lot of time between now and Monday, believe it or not. Friday, Saturday, three whole days. Don't agonize over it. And the one thing I will say, I think the front office has in the past and will in the future do a very good job of giving Rod Brind'Amour enough talent to work with. So before we say goodbye, go to hockey-reference.com and look at the roster that made the playoffs in year one. Go look at that. They made the playoffs with that team. I think Rod Brind'Amour can figure out a way to make the playoffs. Put yourself in position. You might not be third best record in the NHL. Especially with some of the star caliber players that Carolina's got. You've got Aho. You got Jarvis. You got Svechnikov. You're going to have, my guess is, either Necas or Guentzel or a reasonable facsimile of one of them. You'll have enough identity, energy players to compete. You still have Slavin. I think Orlov and Chatfield were awesome at the end of last year. And I think Carolina will just they'll have enough. They will certainly not be a pushover. And I think the head coach always will have his team ready to go. Again, I didn't think this was going to be, as I got into it, I didn't think it was going to be a positive, rah-rah, we're going to sign all these free agents kind of a conversation. And I hope I didn't scare any of you, but I just think that the way this team operates in terms of value, they have an assigned number. They're really not going to go beyond it. So, with all of that said, we got a few days, and there's going to be a lot. Hell, as we were talking here, who knows what happened? So, we'll be back as warranted. If we have to do an emergency pod, we'll do an emergency pod. But it's been fun. I've talked myself silly. And again, shouts to Highland Brewing up in Asheville. It's fantastic. And I'm Adam Gold. Thank you very much. Brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. You can see the icon right there in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. Brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. If it's for the exterior of your home, you can find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. Here on my studio back porch here in Oxford, North Carolina. We'll see everybody as needed sometime early next week for sure, after free agency kicks in a high gear. Until then, I wish you all a very good night on the Canes Corner Podcast.